Amy Vitale, and it's with great respect and admiration that I introduce her. She is many things, but I'll keep the list short. She is a Nikon ambassador, a National Geographic writer, photographer, and filmmaker. Her work focuses on the stories that show our deep connection to the natural world. She has traveled to more than 100 countries, bearing witness not only to violence and conflict, but also to the surreal beauty and the enduring power of the human spirit. All of these very present in her photographs, which we'll see many of. Throughout the years, she has lived in mud huts in war zones, contracted malaria even, and donned a panda suit, keeping true to her belief in the importance of living the story. In 2009, after shooting a powerful story on the transport and release of one of the world's last white rhinos, Amy shifted her focus to today's most compelling wildlife and environmental stories. She is currently based in beautiful Montana, where she documents stunning photographs of the issues facing her own backyard as well. Her work, ethics, and compassionate attitude can be an inspiration for us all. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions, so please put those in the chat and we'll get to them after she gives her talk, which is called Extreme Conservation, and I can't wait to hear it. So Amy, thank you so much. I'm gonna add you in here, and I see your presentation is up, so I'll let you take it away. Thank you. Oh, I think you might be on mute. We're not hearing you, Amy.
That's not good. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Hello? Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, I think somebody on your end muted me. Okay, here we go. So I just want to talk about the impossible. I really believe in the impossible. And in my experience, to do that, you have to have hope, wild hope. And the impossible to me starts with recasting that narrative. And that usually requires a different way of seeing things. It doesn't necessarily fit into, the current narrative. And today I'm going to share a couple of stories about people that are doing unimaginable and things for conservation and reimagining the world we live in. I really believe that is the way forward. So let's start in China, a country that is not typically known for its environmental stewardship. But I was invited to be a part of the first foreign film crew to photograph this incredible story of this captive-born female panda, coincidentally named Hope, as she is released into the wild. And I got front row access to this, which was a very hard thing to do at the time because they don't let many people, particularly foreigners, in to document these moments. So I was trying to be empathetic to Hope as she was leaving home forever. I mean, she must have been terrified. So I dressed up in this ghillie suit. And because I did that, the head of the panda program, who's affectionately called Papa Panda, saw me, came up and gave me a hug and said, "Thank you so much for thinking of Hope. We really appreciate that. And I'm going to let you hold 2 baby pandas." And I was so thrilled. But then he followed that up with saying, "I want you to know how special this is. President Obama, he only held 1 panda." So not only did I get 2 baby pandas, I got their bumper crop laid out in a blanket. And then that was the moment that I knew I had access. I mean, I think as journalists and storytellers, the main thing is, how do you get access to some of these really incredible stories? And at that moment, immediately, I went right to National Geographic and really worked it into a story for the magazine. And there were challenges as a photographer. I mean, I think, how do we create something that might surprise our readers? It's not like people haven't seen photos of pandas. They must be the most known animal on the planet. Um, and today I just want to talk about, being a storyteller. It's not about being Shackleton and traveling to the most remote corners of the planet. I think the real secret in powerful storytelling is about not where you go and how exotic things are. It's actually about how you tell stories. And again, it's not like anybody hasn't seen these pictures of pandas. Zoos literally pay millions of dollars for panda ambassadors who are on loan from China, and they never fail to attract a crowd. So that's where my work began. I really had to dig in and figure out how I was going to tell this story in a unique way. And it's hard to imagine, but these incredible creatures were once as mythical and elusive as Bigfoot. I mean, they have been around the planet for millions of years, but if you can believe it, they were only discovered. The first one was actually captured alive only in 1936. That is crazy. That is mind-blowing when you consider, how difficult that must have been. And if you look at ancient Chinese art, you will see representations of every other kind of creature, from, even bears, other kinds of bears, even representations of bamboo. But you'll never see a representation of a panda bear if you go back 1,000 years, because they were that elusive. And how did they stay so elusive? Well, adaptation. Remember, panda bears are, they are bears. They normally survived on a diet of meat, but rather than compete with all these other predators, pandas evolved their whole digestive system, their behaviors. They even developed a sixth toe so that they could eat bamboo and hide in those thick bamboo forests away from humans and all these other predators. It's an incredible story. And, for a long time, scientists thought pandas were a species without a sex drive. This led some scientists to try all these really extreme methods, like showing them videos of giant pandas mating and giving the males Viagra. I'm not even making this up. They did everything they could to try to get these pandas to breed, but they were having no success in the captive breeding program for a couple of decades. And finally, they figured two really important things out. The first was pandas only have 24 to 72 hours in an entire year to get pregnant. That is not a big window. And the second thing is they need to have mutual attraction, but they don't have dating sites, right? So they had to give her a multitude of a selection of partners. And she's a discerning creature like all of us. It's all about selecting the right partner. In China, the scientists and the amazing people behind that program really cracked the code on how you breed them in captivity. This is what they look like when they're born: tiny, blind, helpless, 1/900th the size of their mothers. They are extraordinarily attentive mothers. They will often give up food and water for days just to cradle their newborns. They are also one of the fastest growing mammals on the planet. They grew like little bamboo shoots right before my eyes. And if you were wondering, they kind of smell like little wet puppy dogs. These are, really amazing creatures. And half the time, the mothers will give birth to twins. And so in the wild, they would let the weakest one die. But in China, obviously, they're not going to do that. So they've created this very elaborate swapping system where the human nannies spend half the time with the babies, and then the real mothers spend the other half of the time, so that all the babies get to survive. And so the most extraordinary part of this story is the pandas that get selected to go back into a rewilding program. They decided it's not enough to breed them in captivity. You know, they had a magic number of 300 that they wanted in captivity just in case they went extinct in the wild. They've actually surpassed that number, and they said we need to get them back into the wild to create diversity as well. And so they began this rewilding program. And it turns out after one generation in captivity, pandas don't know how to live in the wild anymore. They literally have to be trained to be wild. And so that's what happened. One of the biggest pieces is human predator, humans are the biggest predators. So Papa Panda said they should never be comfortable around humans. So we all had to wear these crazy panda costumes that were actually scented with panda urine. They had to pass all these tests like, do they run away from other predators like the leopards? So they put these stuffed leopards in these big enclosures. Now, if the baby was curious and went up and sniffed it, she fails. She goes back to captivity forever. But if she runs up to the top of a treetop and runs away, she passes that test and gradually gets to, go into these bigger and bigger enclosures. And then Papa Panda calls the biggest enclosure of all graduating Harvard, and that means it's graduated to the wild. So it's just this incredible story that reminds me miracles can happen. The pandas in these faraway mountains, they don't have lines of school children waiting for them or a fan page on Facebook, but as these great little bears trundle off into the wild, they took with them the hope for their entire species. And I'm really happy to say that there's been this slow and steady incline in the population of giant pandas in the wild. It's a testament to the perseverance and efforts of the Chinese scientists and conservationists. And by breeding and releasing pandas and protecting the habitat, China might be on their way to successfully saving its most famous ambassador, and in the process, putting the wild back into an icon. The panda reminds us that nature is resilient, but we have to give it a chance for it to succeed. And now the big question is, how do we turn this incredible story of success into a solution to the larger problem, which is the long-term solution of all endangered species? Now I'm going to go and move to my next story, which is giraffes. A few years ago, turned my attention to giraffes. They are going through a silent extinction, and I'm fascinated by them as well. I mean, they don't even look like they belong on this planet. From their long necks to their unusual ossicones that look like antennas, everything about them looks like they came from another planet. The giraffe is the tallest living terrestrial animal. They can run as fast as 35 miles per hour over short distances, and they only need 5 to 30 minutes of sleep in a 24-hour period. Gosh, I wish I could have that. They often achieve that in quick naps that may only last a minute or two at a time. It's really extraordinary. It was thought that giraffes did not make any sounds. This is not known to be untrue. This is now known to be untrue because giraffes do snort and hiss and make these flute-like sounds, as well as these really low-pitched sounds that go beyond the range of what humans can hear. Giraffes have been traditionally considered to be one species, which is why, they call it the silent extinction, because people go to Africa and they're like, I see plenty of giraffes. Well, as it turns out, scientists say that there could be up to, right now there's 11 subspecies, but scientifically they are endangered. Legally, they're not, because they're considered this one species, but they are in serious trouble. The population overall has declined 30 to 40% in just 30 years. One study suggests that giraffes should be divided into 4 distinct species: the southern giraffe, the Maasai giraffe, the reticulated giraffe, and the northern giraffe. Um, so this next picture, this is a subspecies of the West African giraffe, which is distinguished by these light colored spots. They're beautiful. They're found in the Sahel regions of West Africa, and they were actually down to less than 49 of them at one point, just a few decades ago. And today, that is a miraculous story. They've actually got more than 600 of them because of the communities and the government working together. And, I think, yeah, it was 1996 when they were down to 49. So they are some of the most endangered large mammals in the world. Now I want to take us to a story in Kenya. This is an island that was once a peninsula in Lake Baringo, and rising waters turned it into this muddy island really quickly. The lake's water levels have been slowly rising over time, but in 2020, torrential rains caused severe flooding. The rains were relentless, and the lake was rising 6 inches every day because of these massive storms that rolled in. It was wild to witness this. And as a result, 9 giraffes became stranded on that little island that was once this peninsula with limited resources. They were really struggling. It was especially grim for one giraffe named Asiwa, who was stuck on a marshy part of the island. She was separated from the other giraffes, and she had only about a acre of land to feed on. She was living there with hippos, crocodiles, poisonous snakes, and a few really precious warthogs. That was it. And every day the flooding was getting worse. Time was running out for Asiwa. So she's a Rothschild's giraffe, and she needed to be rescued. Conservationists teamed up with the Kenya Wildlife Authorities and local community members from this Ruko Conservancy, and they had this audacious plan to move these giraffe off the island into a new sanctuary within this 44,000 acre Ruko Wildlife Conservancy. The first plan was to try to coax them onto these handmade rafts. It was actually one handmade raft, by feeding them, mangoes and sweet things. But the plan didn't work out that way for Asiwa. She could not be coaxed onto the raft. So she needed to be darted and tranquilized and moved onto the raft. But it's really not an easy thing to dart and tranquilize a giraffe because of their anatomy. It's particularly dangerous because when giraffes fall down to the ground, they can literally choke on their own saliva, or their brains can be damaged by the changes in the blood pressure. So it's really important that once the giraffe falls, that vets are there to immediately counteract that drug with a reversal drug. It's a really complex procedure. I mean, rhinos and elephants, which I've seen translated, believe it or not, are far easier to move than a giraffe. But Asiwa went down in this thick acacia bush, probably as far away from the barge as possible, but the team was there immediately to help her. And they needed to get her up really quickly. They put a blindfold on her, put these ropes around her, and they put socks in her ears to quiet things. And then they kind of led her in with these ropes towards the raft. They actually called it the Giraffe, which I thought was hilarious. So she got up and she was like a little puppy dog. She walked right onto the giraffe. She followed this trail she was used to walking on, sort of knowing, I think those ossicones must have some kind of sense something happened, because she knew exactly where she was going. And off she went. And it was just an incredible thing. I think we were all really anxious, biting our fingernails, but there was some sort of humor to all of it because this little red speedboat just kind of tugged it along for a little over a mile from this island where they were stranded to the conservancy. And this is the moment right before they took the blindfold off. They opened the door and then they rip it off with those ropes, the blindfold, take the socks out of her ears, and off she runs. And I can tell you there was a huge sense of relief, particularly for Asiwa, because she was the first one. Nobody really knew what would happen when they're transporting these creatures, these fragile but very strong creatures across that lake. And so, I just want to talk about the giraffes, particularly the Rothschild giraffes. They've lost about 80% of their population in the last 30 years. So that subspecies is really suffering. It's making it one of the most imperiled giraffe subspecies because of some poaching, but mostly habitat loss. They are down to 2,000 to 3,000 of them in Africa, and 800 of them are in Kenya. The hope is that this is just the first step in reintroducing these giraffes back to their historical home across the Western Rift Valley. And hopefully over the next 20 to 30 years, they will be successful. So, I just want to wrap up and say there are so many stories of hope everywhere I go. And I see people often with very little means making huge impacts in their communities and the planet. And I think it's really important to shed some light on those stories too, where against all odds, it's the individuals who are making a difference. They are doing the impossible. And going back to the idea of wild hope, you just have to have the hope. And I want to do a shout out right now to Save Giraffes Now. It's a fantastic, small, new nonprofit that helped facilitate this and so many other wonderful projects. And, if you are interested in supporting, there's so many great organizations like Save Giraffe Now. And this is actually at Sarara Camp, this picture in northern Kenya. And there's just wonderful places and people to support. So I just want to wrap up and say what happens next is really in all of our hands. Nature is incredibly resilient if we make it a priority, if we give it that chance. All of us have the ability to ignite action and help shape the world we really want to live in. There is a role for each and every one of us. I truly, truly believe that. And it's important that all of us become the messengers. So yes, we have poked some holes in our own shared life raft here, planet Earth. So what do we do? And I believe it first begins with shining a light on the people who are caring for the environment. We must treat all humans with empathy. There is room enough for all of us, but only if we truly hear one another. And yes, those challenges are formidable. But no time in human history has there been a greater awareness and opportunity for transformation. So take that first step, fall in love with the world. Love gives us the courage to go out and make a difference. Each of us can be a catalyst that starts this whole chain reaction. But I'm not naive, and I know it's not just about falling in love with the planet. In fact, that may not be what saves us. What is going to save us all is getting beyond routine ways of thinking. Wonder is what allows us to reimagine our future together. Wonder allows us to believe that we can fundamentally change the course we're currently on. And when we experience wonder, it is inexplicable, it's beautiful, and everything changes right then. And you can never go back. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop my sharing.
Thank you, Amy. Well, I have to say your Instagram, for anyone who wants to follow it at Amy Vitale, certainly will add wonder to your day. It's just a beautiful array of all of the places she's been around the world and continues to document, even outside in her backyard in gorgeous Montana. You certainly help us see the world in extraordinary ways, and the nuance and individuality that exists for all of these animals in their lives. And I think it's incredible the fact you shared about the pandas being, discovered to science and popularized in 1936. I mean, we're still discovering animals in the world. Even 5 years ago, there was a species of beaked whale that was discovered to science off the coast of Japan, and that's this massive mammal. So this world is still rich, and there's a lot worth falling in love with and defending. So you work across so many countries and with so many different communities defending wildlife. What's it like to integrate into various communities, non-human and human, in terms of diversity and just novel experiences and environments to have to adapt to?
Oh, I actually treat everything, I've sort of lost the idea of exotic, and I just believe that there is a universal truth about, like you just mentioned. And, I find the wonder as exhilarating and exciting in my own backyard here in Montana as I do, 12,000 miles away. And my secret really is to go back often to the same places. And I find that going deep into any story, taking time, going slow, really developing strong relationships is so important so that we can truly listen and hear one another and take the time to understand one another, both human and animals.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that all of us have figured out for ourselves in just our immediate environments with the pandemic hemming us in. I mean, I know personally I got a microscope, so I'm now looking at plants in my backyard and appreciating the complexity on that, level of scale. So whether it's just right outside our own yards or a ticket across the oceans to another place, I really appreciate that attitude. I'll just leave you with one question before we bring our next host in, which is, there's a big discussion today around storytelling for the environment, and you're so thoughtful with the way that you frame stories. And when it comes to the climate and biodiversity, there's definitely a sense of urgency in terms of delivering these stories to people. And then I think there's a concern that some people may look away in overwhelm or with a sense of doom. So, how do you think about this in terms of the kind of tone or spirit you bring to communicating hard things?
Thank you. That's such a great question. And I really do believe it is about talking about the challenges, but also offering some solutions. It can't, I think, if you only talk about the horrors of the world, it's devastating. It doesn't, I think it can be really debilitating to so many of us, myself included. I need that hope. I think having the hope, giving people real a trajectory of where they can go is so powerful. And I find that everywhere I go is that there's always beautiful stories. And, and I don't mean to be Pollyanna here. It's not just whitewashing anything. You've got to talk about those challenges. But again, remember to keep it balanced.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. A wonderful presentation as always, and we look forward to seeing all of the stories and photographs that you continue to bring us from your travels and beyond.
Thank you. I can't wait to see your stories as well. It's so
Thank
great
you.
to be connected with you too.
All right. Thank you so
Thanks.
much,
Have a
Amy.
great afternoon.